How's it going, everybody? My name is Infamous Isaac, and I'm here with a video on Jojo's. Actually, surprisingly enough, I haven't talked about this show on the channel ever. And by the way, funnily enough, as a sidebar, if you guys ever have a Minecraft just world, or well, Minecraft world period, where you have stuff built, whether it's a simple thing, where it's your survival world, whether it's anything, and you're just in a call with some friends, whether it's in a party on PlayStation or Xbox or however they do it, or on a Discord call or anything, right? And you're just running around on Minecraft, jumping and parkouring with any little obstacle that you have. Like, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the most like therapeutic things you can do while like talking to somebody. It's so mind-numbing, but it's so fun and it's so pointless. Like I do it on in my videos because it doesn't take brain power. Like the people who play games in their YouTube videos and can talk about something else completely that isn't the game, those people are some champions, genuinely. That takes so much brain power of trying to keep coherent thoughts while also not interrupting yourself. But then, you can also edit that stuff out so it doesn't matter. But it takes a lot of practice and the stuttering as well like that. I don't know, it's crazy. And I just generally respect it. Hopefully one day I can get there. But JoJo's, right? I haven't talked about it on the channel, which again, surprisingly enough, is crazy because I've read not part five. I've read part six, seven, and eight. I've watched part one through five, and I'm waiting for part nine to come out. So why haven't I talked about it? Because I had a YouTube channel, or yeah, when I finished part eight, I had a YouTube channel, so I could have talked about it. I could have talked about part five when that finished. Oh, no, actually I couldn't because part five finished, but before I started uploading on YouTube, I think. And if it didn't, I don't think I watched it up to that point. I don't remember, but I did watch JoJo's before, so it's the fact that I haven't talked about it. Again, it's generally surprising. But I'm just gonna give like a rough overview on it a little bit, just talking about it. I'm not gonna review any of it because I feel like that's too much to do in one video, especially since I haven't finished watching part six, and since I read it in the manga first, and that's been like 4 years since I read it, 3 to 4, and this it's been a while since I watched part six, like the beginning of it as well. So it's I should give it its breathing room. And if I do watch part six all the way through, which I probably will, it's just I don't know when I'm gonna do it. I'll make a video on it, and then maybe I'll make a video on part one through three, four, five, all that stuff, and maybe parts seven and eight. Maybe. But JoJo's overall, like I got into it because some friends got me into it. I I the oh the friend group that I hang out with the most now, they were like, yo, JoJo's is so cool, check it out, and I was like, oh, okay. And it was starting with part one and part two, and some people don't like those parts. They don't like Jonathan, or they just don't like part two because it's not part three and onwards, right? Because they don't have stands, and it's whatever. However you feel about that's however you feel like that, or how you feel about it. I think part one is good. I don't mind part one at all. I think Jonathan's fire. I think Dio was cool. I think all the stuff that they had was funny, and also cool at the same time. Like for what it was, part one was a good starter. And it's just the fact that it got outdone by other parts that it gets outshined, you know? So it's not its fault because it was the beginning. And the beginning, if you're fortunate enough, is probably going to be the worst part of your series. So, or at the very least, if the other parts of the series are better. But part two, that part pretty fire. I think Joseph was really sick. So I like part two. I enjoyed it a lot. But it is short. It is generally short. Honestly, I think it's shorter than part one, since part one and part two are basically put together. It comes out to like a season, like 24 episodes around there. So it you know it's not that long, just like part one, and it was enjoyable as well. Then you get to part three where things got really crazy because part three is so long. Genuinely, it's almost 50 episodes with the content. Like, part three is almost as long as Soul Eater is, which is crazy. Like, that is insane. That one JoJo part is almost as long as that show. It's nutty. It's genuinely nutty. And it shows because some parts are just like filler villain of the week type stuff because it was a shonen. So it's like you had to have that stuff, right? Especially since JoJo's came out in the 80s slash 90s type stuff. So it did that because it was following the trends, whatever, all that stuff, but also because it was the trend. So why wouldn't you do that? And also, it was inspired by Fist of the North Star, all that stuff, blah blah blah. But part three is not my favorite part, no sense of the word. But it is important. It is an important part because it introduces stands, and it's like, oh shoot, stands are important and stands are cool because it leads to some of the coolest parts of JoJo's, and it also takes away breathing. The I, I forgot what what the actual power is, but the breathing system in part one and two that Joseph and Jonathan used, it takes that away and puts oh, Hamon. There you go. It basically just decreases Hamon and his viability and just puts stands there. Because if you don't have a stand, Hamon won't. It doesn't matter. Like it generally just does not matter. So stands are the new wave, right? Part Part three introduced that, and part three is pretty iconic. I'm not even gonna lie. Like Jodo versus Dio alone is really iconic because if you've been on Instagram and seen some anime stuff or just seen anime period, you've or seen memes at all, you probably seen Jotaro versus Dio, like the manga panel. It's so fire. Generally one of the most fire manga panels I've ever seen. It is so sick. Then you have part four. And part four, some people like it, some people hate it. I think part four is cool. I it's hard to rank these because my opinion on all of them changes a lot. And also I start forgetting things about certain parts and I start remembering things about certain parts the more the anime comes out. So it's difficult to say, right? But I think part 4 was good, you know. I liked Josuke, I liked his crew, I liked the mystery in Morio Town, all that stuff. I thought Yoshikage Kira was really cool. I really like his power, bites the dust. All that's so sick. Like it was a good part. It's just other parts are better. But part four, it was fire. That was when I was in my peak of watching JoJo's. Because once I got to part four, that was when it was like, yo, dog, this is heat. This is some heat. I remember when it was this one kid who was doing rock paper scissors, and then Josuke pulls out a piece of paper that he was given by that kid, I think, or that he found, and he flips the paper over once, flips it again, and then all you see is just a gun come out from the side of the paper, dog. It is like that's just like the perfect explanation, excuse me, as to what JoJo's is. Randomness. Complete random nonsense that the author I forgot his name. I was about to call him Yoshikage Kiro, but you know, whatever the author's name is, the mangaka, whatever he can think of, bro, because he just gets wackier and wackier with the stand powers and just the fights in general, and you'll see that the more you go on. But overall, you know, part four, it was good. And oh, by the way, stands, if you don't know, and this video honestly is kind of like a little primer to JoJo's, I guess, while also having spoilers and just explaining what I think, what I like about it, whatever. Stands are named after songs and bands in real life, you know. So like, Bites the Dust is off of Queen, I think. Queen, yeah, whatever. There's also Bohemian Rhapsody, or no. Bites the Dust. I'm not gonna say who it's from because I don't know. Whatever. It's a song though. You probably heard it. And then Bohemian Rhapsody is also another stand. You have Notorious B.I.G., which you know you can probably tell who that is if you know what hip hop is, and just a bunch of other stuff, right? So in part three, they didn't have that because the stands were named after tarot cards. But in part four onwards, they're all named after music bands, songs, people, all that stuff. And you'll notice that when you hear songs that you recognize, if they're old songs that the author likes, because that's what he does it, because he likes those songs, which is generally such a cool idea, honestly. Naming stands after songs, it's so creative and so fun. Like, because you can probably make a song completely just, or make a stand completely based off of a song type stuff, which is really cool. But again, then you have part five, you get into that, and part five is cool. A lot of people like it, a lot of people don't like it. They think Giorno is pretty BS because he's really strong. I can see that. Golden Experience Requiem is kind of crazy. I'm not here to talk about power scaling up because that's not my forte. I don't care either. But part five, not my favorite part in the Stand series. And to be honest with you, probably my least favorite part in the Stand series. While part five had some great fights and a good story, I didn't like it as much as the upcoming parts and part four. I think part five was a good way to get people into JoJo's for sure, but it wasn't for me. But it was cool. Genuinely, it was a cool part, no doubt. And by the way, I want to mention, part one takes place in like the 20th century. Part two takes place, or excuse me, part one takes place in the 19th century. Part two takes place in the 20th century around World War One, or excuse me, World War Two. Part three takes place in the 80s, and Jonathan is like 20 years old, in his prime basically. Joseph is also in his prime. Jotaro is a 17-year-old kid, and Jotaro again in the 80s. Part 4, Josuke is like a 15-year-old kid in his prime type stuff, and in the 1990s, I think 1999. And part 5, Giorno is a 15-year-old kid in 2001 Italy. Jonathan, he's English. He's in England. Josuke, he's in America. Jotaro's in Japan, going into India, Egypt, all that stuff to find Dio, and Josuke is in Japan. Part five, again, Italy, all that stuff. But again, part five, it's alright for me. It was good, but not my favorite. By far, not my favorite. And yeah, part six, a part that people do not like generally just did not like. And I don't know, I don't get it. There are some bad fights, there are some weird plot points. I can admit that. But I generally enjoyed part five. It has some of my favorite fights, like Sea Moon. Generally one of my favorite JoJo fights, like besides Vitamin C in part eight. But Sea Moon is awesome. That was one of the few fights that in a manga had my jaw dropped. Like it was so sick. And that was before I read like Jujutsu Kaisen or Dragon Ball Super or anything like that. So this was me as a youngin, just learning about all this stuff. Like what you could do in a manga fight, bro. It was so fire. So that was sick. Just the characters overall as well. You have Jolene, honestly one of my favorite JoJo protagonists. She's really fire. Yeah, and also people are just really horny for her, but we don't talk about that. We have Hermes, also really fire because she's Hispanic, so that's cool. She or Hermes, whatever you want to call her. You have I forgot her name, but the water like algae girl, the fungi girl, I forgot her name. She she has green hair. I'm sorry that I forgot her name. It's been a while, but you also have Anasway, who's cool. He's probably my least favorite out of all of them, but he's all right. You have Emporio, who's really fire. He has a, I think it's a Cubs jersey from baseball, and it's just like such a weird design, but it's so cool. 'Cause I think Cubs are the Cubs are a Florida team. I don't know. I don't know much about baseball or anything about baseball, so my mistake. And you also have Jotaro, because Jotaro is also a part of this. Jotaro was a part of Part 3 as the main character, Part 4 as a side character, and Part 6 as a side character. And all these characters have relations. Part one, Jonathan is the ancestor to everybody because he's the grandfather to Joseph, and then Joseph, he's the grandfather to Jotaro. So, and Jotaro is related to Josuke because Joseph went on a cheating binge and cheated on his wife Holly and had a son with this Japanese girl, and now Josuke is basically his cousin type stuff or uncle or something like that. Uncle, yeah, uncle, and that's how they're related by blood. So, in part five, Giorno is actually Dio's son. I don't remember how. I don't remember why, but he is a part of his family, and because Jonathan, which actually big spoiler, big spoiler by the way. Skip like 20 seconds ahead if you don't want to get spoiled. Jonathan, since he got his body taken by Dio, he is basically Giorno's father, which is weird to think about, right? So Giorno is related to Joestars, but also he's related to Dio, since you mix both of those bloodlines together. But by the way, spoiler over. So you have part six where Jotaro is Jolene's father. That's the most direct thing that we have, where literally she is just Jotaro's daughter, all that stuff, and she's like in her mid 20s, early 20s, that type of stuff. And it takes place in Florida in 2011. So it's or not 2011, whatever. Yeah, I think 2011 actually. I don't remember. I don't know if I'm getting mixed up with part 8. But part 6, I generally enjoyed it. I thought some of the fights are really good, some of the fights aren't really good. Some of the stands are kind of weird, some of the stands are really cool. The villain, Poochie, I thought he was really cool. He reminds me a little bit of like Aizen type stuff, but in a really weird way because they're both calculating, both cold, both crazy. They're cool, they're really cool. But next, you have part 7. I can't speak much on part 7 because I've forgotten a lot of it. But I do remember I really enjoyed it. Not my favorite part. People really like this part, but this is a spoiler for part 6, by the way. Part 7 is a completely like a renewed timeline because part 6's ending led to this. So this is a new timeline, alternate universe where Jonathan Joestar is crippled and he's a horse racer. And so this takes place in the 1700s. So I think the 16th century, 7, 17th, 18th century, actually the 18th century, I think. So that's all going on. And it's basically a retelling of part 1, but in a better way. So it's really cool. It's really cool how they did that and just it was a good part. Generally, part 7 is a good part with the story, with the characters, with the fights. Even though it's really weird, it was just fun to read. And you have fights like who killed Johnny, the guy with the watch on his hand who controlled time, Dio when he became a Velociraptor, Dio when he got the world. What's his dude's name? Funny Valentine. All those fights just there it was such a good part with the fights. I generally enjoyed it, and the story was fun. It was cool. The characters were cool. Not many that I can remember except Johnny and Gyro, and then you have the Hot Pants. I think that's her name, and Valentine, Dio, all of them. You have some memorable characters. I'm just forgetting some because one of my friends, he knows a lot about like the manga JoJo's because he really enjoyed it as well to the point. Well, actually, I'll get to that later. But he knows a lot more about Part 7, or remembers a lot more about Part 7 than I do. So I one day hopefully we can make a video just talking about it or whatever. But then we get Part 8, my favorite part. This is bar none my favorite. I read it from start to finish. I loved it. It was awesome. I loved the main character. I loved the fights. I loved the side characters. I loved the setting. I loved all of it. Almost all of it. I really enjoyed it. I love the final villain as well. Part 8 is by far my favorite. Best character for me, best story, all that. And it takes place in 2011 Morio. Or yeah, I think Morio. So part 7 was Johnny basically, and part 8 is Josefumi or Josuke 8. Since it's weird. It's a crazy plot point that I don't want to explain, but just know part 8 is Josuke, but not really Josuke. That's why I called him Josefumi. So it's it's basically an alternate timeline part 4, except it's not in 2000 not it's in 2011 instead of 1999. So all that stuff is going on. I really like the characters in this part. I really like the fights. I like the way it was just set up and the mystery behind it all. Learning about all the mystery in this part was so fire. Learning about the final bad guy and how it had like a part 5 bad guy type thing where Diavolo was just very secretive. But in part 8 you don't know who the main bad guy is until like the final parts of the story. But he was a really cool bad guy. He's been there since like the beginning type stuff. So that's really cool. Just overall, part 8 was so much fun to me. It's my favorite, bar none. Part 8 is my favorite. And if I were to make a tier list on it, it would definitely be up in the top. Which honestly, I probably should have made a tier list for this video. Like, what? Man, whatever. It doesn't matter. But part 8, great. And overall, just JoJo's is a fun series. It's complicated sometimes with the stands because once you have so many stands and you start running out of ideas, you have to make the powers more complicated and niche. So the fights just have to be like basically, how do I outsmart this guy with my niche and weird power? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And that's how it is. But I can't lie, I've enjoyed JoJo's a lot. Like I've gone through my highs and lows with it, but overall I don't regret reading it, watching it, getting introduced to it by my friends, showing Reaper Jodo versus Dio when we were in high school. It was so cool, you know. I have some memories with the show, and overall I don't regret it. So when I finish part 6, I'll talk about that. Also, I have to talk about Castlevania. I never talked about it because I started watching that, I think, when I wasn't really uploading much onto YouTube. I did have a YouTube channel, but I just didn't upload consistently. So I'm gonna do that as well. But thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoy. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, this has been Infamous Isaac, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Peace.